Welcome to We're Gonna Run It with Joe Lisi and Terry Bowden.
You're listening to We're Gonna Run It.
What's your game plan?
Can they run, but will they run? If you want to run the ball, you got to give it to a guy that's a running back.
Gutless. We're gonna run it.
We're gonna play blue collar. Enjoy it. I said it. Have a little heart and have some stones.
We're gonna run it.
If you want to throw an RPO, you got to run first, pass second. That's why it's not called a PRO. It's an RPO. You got to start with a running game that puts people on their heel.
Take a look at my algo. His algo is used with all data from last year. You're so smart, you're stupid.
We're gonna run it.
And the people that believe that talking head are even stupider than what I thought. I said it.
If you want to run the ball, you got to give it to a guy that's a running back.
You got no shot to get back into the series. No shot. I said it. What's your game plan?
We're gonna run it.
Oh, week number 3 is in the books. Welcome to We're Gonna Run It. Joe Lisi Terry Bowden, sponsored by FanDuel. Coach, marquee upsets across the top 25 last week. We saw Notre Dame go down to Texas A&M, the wild one in Knoxville. Georgia prevails 44-41. And then the game that got it started all at 12 o'clock noon, Georgia Tech strikes the upset over Clemson 24-21. It's a wide open race for a potential national championship this year.
You know, all those games were not quite toss-ups, but they were one that I thought either team that played better than the other, didn't turn the ball over, made big plays. There were ones that either team could go out and take that game. But you know, Georgia Tech, we picked Georgia Tech. I thought the way they're playing and the mindset at Georgia Tech right now, the toughness, the confidence, the running ability, and the leadership of their quarterback. Maybe, I don't know if he's the best NFL quarterback, but the best quarterback leading his team right now in the country may be Haynes King.
And you talk about Haynes King, 2 games now against Colorado and the home game last week against Clemson. He rushes for over 100 yards, clean with the football. He throws for 208 yards through the air, completes 20 of 28 passes, and really put Clemson at a disadvantage. Now, 3 straight weeks where we've seen this Clemson Tiger team just limp out to a slow start. Do you chalk it up to just team mentality right now under Dabo Swinney, or do they have a deeper problem with a lack of talent?
Well, I mean, now, because you're talking, do they have the talent of the best teams in America? They have some talent, and they're going to be favored most of their games, and they don't fall off the cliff. But the question you have to ask yourself, were they as good as Coach Swinney wanted us to believe they were? Because really, he wants to get back to that championship level. And as he talked about his team, he kept saying, we've got that talent like we did when we won the national championship. You know, sometimes he just wants his players to be convinced of that. He wants his fans to be convinced of that. But the more we watch them play and their inability to put Troy away or to fall behind against the LSU and against Georgia Tech, the more you see, boy, I'm not sure that talent level is at the national championship caliber, but they're not going to fall off the cliff. I think he'll make sure they're in a good position to at least stay in the hunt for the conference championship. But I don't see national championship talent there right now.
They lost 3 games last year, so they sit at 1-2. They're going to need a monumental effort. They're going to have Syracuse this week. They're 17.5-point home favorites against the Orange in that matchup. They should win. Whether they cover it or not is a different story. I guess the dominance that we've seen with Clemson, entering that week 1 battle against LSU, they had a 78-9 overall record within the ACC. That LSU game was an out-of-conference game. They've now dropped their 10th conference game dating back to 2015. But a lot of those losses now have been over the past couple of years. We saw Dabo Swinney go 4-4 in the conference just a couple of years ago. We saw them lose last year at home to Louisville. Now they come first game on the road to Georgia Tech. Even though Georgia Tech is a good team, still had 14-1 odds on FanDuel at the start of the year to potentially win an ACC championship. And you lose that game, and just, I guess right now there's many questions, and I brought it up to you earlier. The concern is, does Dabo lose this team? He's a great head coach, but are the kids checked out at this point in the season?
It won't happen. I coached there. I was there 18 and 19 as an analyst. I sat in every meeting. I've known Dabo since he played at Alabama and was a GA. He was on my brother's staff when my brother was the head coach of Clemson. He is a bright leader. A lot of confidence, in control, micromanages. It's not. I don't see him losing his team. He's not as good as he wants to be. He wants to be the Nick Saban type Alabama in the championship hunt every year, year after year after year. But you don't always go like that. You get these lulls. So right now, I'm sure he's frustrated because they're sitting between a good, solid ACC team that each year now contends for the ACC championship, or a top five team that contends for the national. And right now, I think they're down to that ACC level, and they but drop off the cliff, win no games, be at the bottom of the ACC. You haven't seen that facility, you haven't seen that budget, you haven't seen the commitment they have. The big thing with Dabo, I think it's going to remain is he totally committed to portal transfers and NIL. Dabo will tell you he believed that he wanted Clemson because they recruited out of high school, they developed, and they brought people in and taught them the culture of Clemson, the unselfish togetherness, the family atmosphere of Clemson. And he has built his program around that. So NILs and portals go completely against that. Come in 1 year, win, move on. Get more money. That's why you come. Don't get more money, you leave. All that stuff is the way it is right now. And so I think he's probably fighting that behind the scenes. But right now, he just needs to get Cade Klubnik playing as well as he can play. Get that defense playing as well. Run the football. A lot of people don't realize this. When he lost Tony Elliott to Virginia, he lost his offensive coordinator, running back coach. And they ran the football because the offensive coordinator who called the plays was the running back coach, and they built that run. I felt they've lost that some since they lost Tony Elliott to Virginia. They've kind of lost that running mentality that they had, which was very important to make their balanced offense work. And so all those things. I've seen it in my staff. I saw my dad go through losing 3 or 4 coaches after a couple of national championships and losing the chemistry that he had. So right now, I still believe that at Clemson, they're building that chemistry. They're very close. A little bit of what he's doing is trying to work on the mental aspect with his team, but I don't think they're going to fall off now. He just got to find a way to make sure they're in the hunt for the conference championship as long as.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Coach, in that aspect. I think to your point about Tony Elliott, let's not forget Jeff Scott was there. There were co-coordinates. Right. So Scott took the job at USF. Tony Elliott a year later takes the job at Virginia. And
Venables leaves. Venables leaves, remember?
Yeah, and Venables leaves. And I think when you just look at the overall balance of the offense when Trevor Lawrence was there, they averaged 240 rushing yards per game. Last year they were up to 173. You look through 3 games right now, they're only averaging 108 yards on the ground per game, right? That means predictable third downs, more pressure on the offensive line, more pressure on Cade Klubnik to force and potentially make plays. The loss, obviously, of Antonio Williams not being in that lineup hurts, but it's still, Clemson and everybody else. So that was the perception entering this year. And now you see Georgia Tech strike the upset early, and the odds all of a sudden shift. Georgia Tech now is on FanDuel plus 370, and Miami now is the favorite, and Clemson still in the area of about 5-1. What I do want to bring up right now, and I'll pull it up for you, up on FanDuel, is the national championship odds, which I think is very intriguing when you just look at it, Coach, because when we look at the championship odds and you see, Ohio State, you see Penn State, Oregon, all ahead of the SEC, and a team like Miami of Florida that's sitting at 18-1. Are we buying into that right now? Are we buying into the fact that the Big Ten is the superior conference over the likes of the SEC and even a team like the Miami Hurricanes that are 3-0?
I can't buy that the Big Ten from top to bottom, team to team, is as strong as the SEC. But do they have the best chance of winning the national championship? Do they have the two or three best teams in the country year in and year out? We know from a standpoint of NILs and building a roster and having the
Mhm.
most talent. Nobody's doing more than Ohio State and Oregon. Nobody. Penn State's out there jumping up and getting to that point. Michigan's trying to get back, but those two, just look at the name of the game, which is he who has the best players wins. I think the SEC is committed to that, but they don't have any more ability to bring in the best players with the best budget than some of those teams. And so I think right now, I don't think I see nothing wrong with having Oregon and having Penn State and Ohio State, three out of the top five being from the Big Ten. But I think it's got to all settle down towards the end of the season first. The thing that we don't see, we're seeing teams, as we'll see today, that haven't played anybody in the conference yet or haven't played tough teams yet. We'll be talking about Nebraska a little bit down the road, but they really haven't played anybody yet. We don't know how good they are, and we could use that for a lot of teams that have played one Power 5 team. They lost that one, but they killed three teams that were at the G6 level. And so we have to let this thing play out a little more, but we're starting to get a good idea of where Clemson stands, where Miami stands, where Tennessee, Georgia. We're seeing these teams play each other and getting a little better idea of where these teams stand.
Absolutely. And Michigan and Nebraska square off. It's a 2.5-point number. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Nebraska and Dylan Raiola, they're undefeated. They're starting to move the football over the top. Team is more balanced, I think, this year offensively than they were over the past 2 or 3 seasons. We'll see if they could dominate Michigan. And right now, it's a must-win game for Michigan, to your point, because they dropped the game to Oklahoma.
Right.
You can't drop the game all of a sudden, a conference game to Nebraska. All of a sudden now you have 2 losses on the year. If you're looking to potentially get into the college football playoff as maybe an at-large type of team, you're then going to have to run the table, and they still have some difficult games, not just at home, but on the road. So we'll talk about the Wolverines in just a little bit. The other game, though, Coach, that really shocked everybody was this matchup right here, Georgia and Tennessee. We had talked about the dominance of Georgia. They had won 8 straight games in the series, the last 4 by an average margin of victory of 20 points per game. We had talked about just the dominance of in Knoxville by the Bulldogs, winning by 31.5 points per game. And they found themselves staring at a double-digit deficit early in the second quarter. Joey Aguilar, to your point, a quarterback that you coached against, stepped up. He was making deep throws. That offense for Josh Heupel was humming in the first half. The second quarter, about 5 minutes left, Georgia started to make defensive adjustments. They got back into the game, and then it was a back-and-forth heavyweight title fight. In the end, Georgia steals it. But I came away, Coach, more impressed with Tennessee from an offensive perspective than maybe I was of Georgia and winning that matchup.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Tennessee. Really both teams, but I felt finally, and over the last 5 years that Josh Heupel has been at Tennessee, Georgia, Kirby Smart, with the talent he has and the defensive background he has, he knew how to schematically beat Tennessee. He knew how to put 6 defensive players in the box that were talented enough to slow down or stop the run without having to overload it, and then keeping safeties deep and forcing a Tennessee to beat him with short throws, and he would just wear them out and wind them down. But we saw, Joey Aguilar was 14 out of 14 to start the game. He did.
Yeah.
He completed everything, and it was all intermediate passes early on, just like crossing routes and dig routes and inside cuts. He was hitting all those accurately, and that's what they were going to give him. And then they said, we can't let this go on. We've got to take a few more chances. And then I think as much as that, they said, we can't compete. We can't beat these just with defense. We've got to go out and score points. And that when it got to be a good game, Georgia started to put the pedal to the metal offensively to match what Tennessee was doing against their defense. And then it was just a great game of give and take, and 2 offenses, 2 quarterbacks that have now proven they can play in the big leagues and on both teams. And it was just a masterful game until the very end, where one guy missed a field goal, a chip shot, really a chip shot field goal that took it to overtime and gave Georgia a chance to come back and win the game.
Yeah, it back and forth affair. And then I think when you just look at the SEC odds, and I still think Georgia, to me, Coach, is the team to beat when you just look at it, right? But for me, I still think Tennessee could be a team that's dangerous. I think when we look at Texas and we look at teams like South Carolina, and we're going to look at Ole Miss, I think right now I would bet more on Tennessee than I would on Ole Miss, than I would on Texas. And that's not to take away from the Longhorns and Ole Miss right now. But I really came away more impressed with the Tennessee loss and knowing that their offense is more complete now with Joey Aguilar at the helm than they were last year and with Nico, right? And I just think that that's just the way I feel about this offense and just feel overall that this offense has the opportunity to maybe shock some teams if they get into a playoff type of environment. That's what I think, and I think you look at this matchup.
Well, Kirby Smart said in his post-game press conference, we probably shouldn't have won the game. They probably played good enough to win the game. We just made one more play, and they probably outplayed us. And that was basically what I saw out there, that they should have won that game, I guess, but both teams played so close. But what I'm saying, and this is where I agree with you, if Tennessee can take who I consider a national championship caliber team in Georgia and take them down to the wire and maybe should have beaten them, well, then just line everybody else up in the country because they can line up against anybody else and have the same game plan, the same effect. And so, Tennessee, don't know exactly if they'll play like that every week, but they showed clearly they are back to playing elite football when it comes to playing it against the top teams. We've seen a lot of teams that we think are pretty good, but they sure don't play that well and blow people out what they should, or they lose that game, that one big game they've got, they don't win.
Yeah, and again, we'll see exactly how they perform down in SEC competition. This was their first game within conference. They knock off Syracuse in week number 1. We'll see. But Josh Heupel, I think, has a quarterback that he could build around.
Right.
And again, feels more confident now where if the rushing attack isn't there in a playoff type of environment, Joey Aguilar could take a game over with his arm. We'll see if he could do it the rest of the way. Another game within the SEC, Coach, was the LSU win over DJ Lagway and Florida, right? We saw that victory play out in Death Valley. You saw the Tigers defense step up with 5 interceptions. They took one to the house. Offense still inconsistent with Garrett Nussmeier, but they have now beaten Florida 6 out of the last 7 times. Entering that matchup, they had won the last 5 of 6 by an average margin of 10.2 points per game. It was right on the number because Sunday night, when FanDuel put this number out, it was 9.5. It only went down prior to game time. I got it at -6.5 right before kick. That was a dominant defensive effort out of Blake Baker and the crew.
Yeah, they were getting on him. I think the fans or some of the reporters were getting on Brian Kelly after the game. He said they won by 10. He says, I mean, if it had been 40-30 or 50-40, I guess everybody said that's our LSU. If you're the defensive coordinator, you wouldn't have felt very good about yourself. But I think LSU's got to be very, very pleased with the way Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator, has got this defense playing. They're playing dominant defense, and it all begins with playing championship defense. I think where they are beginning to concern the fans or concern people that watch, they need to crank it up offensively because somewhere along the line you're going to, like Georgia, somewhere along the line you're going to have to outscore people. I will say this, if you are a dominant defensive team and you're winning close ball games and you've got basically a defensive mentality to some extent, you're comfortable playing close ball games knowing you're going to win. They went out there and took 5 picks away from DJ Lagway and defensively scored a touchdown. So in a sense, it was a close game by points, but LSU was always kind of in control as far as who was going to win the game. It just was much too close for the fan support. So I think they do need to sit there and look. They need to have those behind the doors meetings What do we got to do to get a bit more efficient and more productive offensively? They're going to play some teams that can put points on the board.
They have a game in a couple of weeks in the Grove in Oxford. Trinidad Chambliss takes over for Austin Simmons. Good thing Trinidad Chambliss can play because I'll tell you this, Austin Simmons and that offense were struggling a little bit. He gets hurt. Chambliss steps up. He takes over. That offense was humming. It was a back and forth type of game. Almost, we talked about it, 72.9 points per game over the last 10 meetings. They blow through the 72. They tacked FanDuel, had a 60.5 number. They got it up right before kick to 62.5. They bet it back down to 59.5, and we saw 60s right before kick. They blew right through that number, Coach. They put up 76 points in that matchup. But again, you talk about the game as a whole, and Taylon Green and Arkansas, again, they're not going to be an SEC championship team, but they are a team that potentially could push the likes of a Tennessee or a Georgia or one of these other teams in the conference because they are stacked. Mike Washington stepped up with another dominating performance. Both of these offenses could be the most explosive in the conference.
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas, and I think, I felt this way now that I watched Vandy play a little bit. If they don't play for the conference championship, they're going to knock somebody off that thinks they're going to play for it. Arkansas is playing too well. Sam Pittman's done a great job of riding the storm, of blocking out the naysayers, and continue to build that football team around Taylor Green. And he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country that really a lot of people haven't paid attention to. He's a phenomenal quarterback, has done great things there. He's dual threat and causes a lot of problems, a little bit like Haynes King, as tall as he is and the way he plays, but is doing a great job with Arkansas. And Ole Miss does put points on the board. You mentioned Trinidad Chambliss playing in place of Austin Simmons. Makes you wonder who he's going to play this week. If Austin Simmons is healthy, which one do you play? Or do you announce it? Now, Lane Kiffin, if he'll have guys limp off the field and act like they're hurt, he's not going to tell us the truth on who's going to play anyway. That's going to be the Lane Kiffin for sure.
Coach, Trinidad Chambliss, he completes 21 of 29, 353 yards, 1 touchdown. He also rushes for 62 yards and 2 tutties. The kid was phenomenal. I mean, you want to talk about these quarterbacks. I mean, Taylor Green accounts for 420 yards of total offense. Taylor Green, 22 of 35, 305 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He rushes 14 times, Coach, for $115 and a touchdown. I thought I was like they had a rushing total on FanDuel of 37.5. The kid blew through that by 70 yards. It's incredible.
Nobody knew about the Chambliss kid. It comes out of Ferris State. Now, how much NIL money do you think they had to put on him? Nothing. Now, they probably got a ton tied up in Simmons, and they've got him. And unfortunately, fans don't understand all this. A lot of these decisions are made. How much are we committed to this guy? Will we lose this guy if we don't play him a little bit? Do we have to play this guy because we promised him this? It's gotten to be a little bit of that behind the scenes. I guess I'm kind of like you. I haven't seen Simmons play as well as Chambliss did in that game against Arkansas, which was a big game. And I'd have a hard time not keeping him in the lineup, even if I'd put my arm around Simmons and say, listen, we got to get you well. We need to let you rest up one more week and make sure what you think you see about Chambliss is what you're going to see, because they're going to play a very interesting Tulane team that is going to be a stinker because they are sneaky good like Vandy.
They are. And again, here's the thing about Ole Miss. If I'm looking big picture, I don't think they're as complete as they were last year with Walter Nolan. Mm-hmm. That front seven was like Swiss cheese. I mean, they gave up a ton of rushing yards. They struggle against mobile quarterbacks. What made them dominant last year is they had the best rush defense in all of the SEC, giving up 82 rushing yards per game. They had defensive ends that crashed down. You had to double team them. You couldn't run on the edge. That's not the case this year. We're back to the old Ole Miss type of teams, and you could go back to the days of Romero, Miller, and Rufus French back in the day. I mean, where you know, Chris Magnum, Paul Head, you name it, where you have to score 50 points just to win if you're a Rebel fan. So is this team good? They're good. Are they elite? No. Now they do play Tulane this week. And what's interesting is that they've beaten Tulane 13 straight times. And the last 4 they have dominated by an average margin of victory of 27.5 points per game. They did not play last year. 2 years ago, Ole Miss goes into Tulane. They play it on the campus. They were in a dogfight. It was back and forth. That line was 9.5, 10. That they had the lead, Tulane did, late in the fourth quarter, and Ole Miss pulls away with 2 scores, and they win it by 17 points and get the cover. I was on Ole Miss that day. I'm telling you, this is not going to be an easy game, even though the game is at home with John Summerall and Tulane that are 3-0.
Yeah, and their quarterback out of BYU, Jake
Retzloff.
Retzloff, that's right. Ran for 4 touchdowns, threw for another one. And I watched him play. He's a nifty running quarterback. He doesn't look like your dual threat, but he runs so effectively. And John Summerall has made a great impact on Tulane. And remember, Willie Fritz, who was the head coach before him, now at Houston, they won with him as well. They have had a solid program now through these 2 head coaches. And they've already knocked off Northwestern, and they've knocked off Duke. And I tell you, Duke played good football. They've got some good football players there. They've got the quarterback that led Tulane to 10 wins last year is playing for Duke. So, and they've reloaded with a quarterback that was awful good at BYU last year. And so now that will be a game that Ole Miss better pay attention, because they don't want to. And because I agree with you, Ole Miss does not have the team they had last year. They're when I went up to Oxford and watched them play Georgia, I was convinced Ole Miss had better talent on the field than I watched them. And I've been a football coach for 30 years as a head coach. I said the best talent's on that defense. It's on the defense it's on Ole Miss. It's not on Georgia. And they won that game decisively. I don't see that this year quite. I think you mentioned it with that front 7. Now they've still got some skill. They've got playmakers at a lot of positions, and the pressure's off of them. Nobody's really expecting a lot out of Ole Miss. We don't talk about them that much nationally, and people aren't saying this is one of the best teams, but they can sneak through and get some big wins. That's why for Ole Miss, they really need to win this one. Better pay attention. Win the ones you're supposed to win, because you may lose 1 or 2 that's a toss-up, or you're a little bit of an underdog. And in the SEC, you're going to get a lot of those. And that was one of with the years that I coached the SEC. I mean, I told my coaches, man, let's don't ever lose one we're supposed to win. That's not always that's not always by what the line is, but what we watch the video. They're at a lower level. We better walk out of here with a W, because when we play other teams, it's going to be a dogfight all the way to the last play.
Absolutely. And again, I think Tulane's going to try and muscle Ole Miss around, more of a blue-collar team. They're going to try and win this lower scoring. Could this game get off the rails? It's possible. But again, when you just look at the line as a whole, Coach, and you just think about the dominance right now on FanDuel, you have Ole Miss as an 11.5-point favorite. Total is 61.5. You have Tulane as a live dog plus 340 on the money line. Ole Miss minus 450. We talked about the dominance. I think you'll see a lot of people bet the money line with Ole Miss. But here's the thing. You know, I'm more inclined to take the under 61.5. I think Summerall and Tulane are going to go in. They're going to play a lot of zone, just seeing exactly the way Arkansas played, right? Arkansas had the type of quarterback in Taylon Green to go toe-to-toe with Austin Simmons. Not to take away from Retzloff, but again, Tulane is not going to put up 50 points to potentially outscore Ole Miss, right? I would think 28 is where Tulane wants to be. Let's try and win it 28-24. So for me, I like the under 61.5 in this matchup.
I like the line. I like the 11.5 points. I think that Tulane is too good of a football team. And Ole Miss is going to go in there and they may win the game, but I think Tulane is going to make this a lot closer. And that's the one I see now. Of course, I know John Summerall. I coached against him a couple of years when he was at Troy. He is you hit it, blue collar, tough guy. He is a tough guy, and he will get his team ready to play a big old SEC school that don't give a flip about the Tulane guys. A lot of guys that go to Tulane from Louisiana or Mississippi, they weren't offered by Ole Miss or LSU. So he'll have that keyed up pretty good, and he's got pretty good football team. He knows how to coach. And so I do believe that if I get 11.5 points, I'm gonna stay with Tulane on that one.
Yeah, we'll break that game down a little bit later. We'll be on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Coach and I will give our picks. It is interesting when you look at some of the other lines. West Virginia, they strike the upset. We talked about the backyard brawl with your former offensive coordinator, Rich Rod. He was catching 7.5 points. He comes out, and you look at that performance. They jump out early on Pittsburgh. I turned it on. They had the lead in the first half, and all of a sudden, second half turnovers really hurt them. They were down by double digits late in the fourth quarter. Yeah. They rally, Coach. They rush it for 58 times for $174 on the ground and 3 touchdowns. Yeah. They pull it out in overtime. They're dogs again on the road this week. That was a gutty effort out of West Virginia this past weekend.
Yeah, and again, I thought after they lost to Ohio last week, and then they lost their top running back for the year, that they just don't have enough weapons. I said, this team is probably 2 years in the process. Pitt's got a quarterback coming back that's one of the better ones in the East, in the ACC, and it'll just be too much. But I grew up in Morgantown. My dad was a head coach there. I played there. I played for Frank Cignetti, father of Kirk Cignetti. Nick Saban was there. I know what it's like to be in that backyard brawl. And so does Rich Rodriguez, who played there and grew up there and head coach there. And he went out there, and to me, as a head coach who calls his own plays, and he's been doing it for 30 years. He was my coordinator. I watched him. He was my brother Tommy's coordinator. He watched him. He is very comfortable handling a team that's down, having to call the right plays, how to make sure they never give up to the very end. As I watched them make that comeback after 10 points down, I said, that's why they rehired Rich Rodriguez. That's why they put him another shot at West Virginia, because he has shown over the years he can win those close games like that by knowing how to handle the offense, how to play it. And they did a masterful job of coming back. And again, don't know if they can compete for the Big 12 this year, but he has got them rolling. And I think West Virginia's got like the right man leading them, and they're going to win some ball games this year from what I saw at Pitt.
Absolutely. They bounced back from the loss from Ohio to Parker Navarro, catching 7.5 points. Rich Rod at home was a live dog. I'm curious to see if they could do it in back-to-back weeks, Coach. That's the biggest question when you just look at West Virginia, and where the mindset after a rivalry game like that, it's got to be so difficult as a head coach, right? You have a rivalry game, you're underdogs, you're at home. Now you got to go on the road to face, a team in Kansas that is explosive, right? They're catching 13.5. What does he instill in this team? Because you can't lose focus going on the road against Jalen Daniels.
Well, all he's got to do is let's go back and watch highlights from the games we just played. Not that we have to just dwell on it, but let's remember what we just did, what we just accomplished. You guys, we're capable of beating anybody in this league if we'll just keep our heads in the game, believe in what we're doing, pull together, don't care who gets the credit, and go out and play football. I think that's what he got to get them doing. The difficult thing is when do you come back? If the team you play next week, you're an underdog because they're a lot better, it's harder to come back. It's harder to beat that team if they're favored because they're athletically a lot better. I've been in those situation building programs with 9 out of the 12 teams I played were a lot better than we were, and we had to see if we could upset a bunch of people. So I think West Virginia this week, they actually have to upset people who probably have better team overall, and that's not easy to do. And sometimes you blame it on not getting up for the next one. It's that you can only upset so many people if they've got better people. If anybody can do it, Rich. But again, Kansas got a good head coach, got an outstanding football team, and they've shown they're pretty dang good this year too.
They are. Again, 13.5-point dogs on FanDuel. They face off against Lance Leipold in Kansas. Kansas had that matchup against Missouri and Bo Prabula a couple of weeks ago. They were 6.5-point road dogs and lost it by 11 points. That game sailed through the total. When we see the total here in Lawrence, it's 55.5 up on FanDuel, plus 365 if you want to back Rich Rodriguez right now, Coach. If you're going to take them on the money line, minus 490 up on FanDuel. So pretty interesting line considering they get the marquee home win over their arch rival. Now they got to go on the road for a conference game. Is there a different mindset, coaching conference games? Like we talk about Dabo Swinney losing that game to Georgia Tech, and you want to take a flip side or a different type of approach where a team, let's say, loses an out-of-conference game. Is it easier to get them motivated when conference play starts?
Yeah, I think your players are smart enough to know what your goals are. They know who's in conference, who's out of conference. They know you get a lot more bonus points for postseason play, chance to win your conference, chance to be a champion, wear that ring in conference. So they will not, it won't be hard to motivate a team on your in-conference games. The problems comes when you're playing a non-conference that's not supposed to be able to beat you. That one you have a harder time keeping your kids up. But they'll have no problem right now because they have not been conference champion level for a while. And Rich knows how to have West Virginia in that position. So they will be fired up because they now have this feeling they've got a head coach that can lead them there. They've won a game against Pitt, their biggest rival, and they have a chance to go on and win these games and be able to be in the hunt for the conference championship. So it'll be a Kansas favored game, but it'll be interesting to see how he gets his team ready. I don't think he has quite the team overall depth of talent at their positions as Kansas right now. But Rich Rodriguez has been doing this for a long time.
Coach, this had to be the game of the weekend. I know we brought up Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah.
That had to be one. 1A, though, had to be this Texas A&M game. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I mean, just goes right down to the wire. They're inside the 10-yard line. They step up. Amazing effort out of Mike Elko and Marcel Reed to steal this game. 41-40. We talked about Texas A&M plus the 6.5. They get the cover. They win it outright. They're 3-0. And I've said this to you, and maybe, I think you're in agreement. Stick a fork in Notre Dame. I don't care what the national championship odds are. I'll give you the latest on FanDuel where Notre Dame is. 30-1. They have absolutely no shot to make the college football playoff. People say that's ridiculous. I don't care if they win 10 in a row. You lost the 2 games that matter. It doesn't matter that you lost them close. That defense is nowhere near where they were last year.
Yeah, and I agree with you because although I think they don't play a top 25 team left on their schedule right now, or
USC might be there. USC is at 25.
They need top 25 teams to beat to move them up, and they don't have it. And again, they've lost 2, and by the fact they're independent, I just don't see it too. I'm in agreement there. They could have won either or both of these games that they lost against Miami and against A&M, but they didn't. And that's where they are, and they got to live with that and keep on playing to see where they can get and see what they can do. But I don't think the college football playoffs is going to be in there. What's amazing in that game there is that the way the game, who'd have thunk it would have been a passing game that won it. The quarterback's arms that won it, not just running games with Notre Dame's running attack and their defense, or a Mike Elko, Texas A&M with their defense, a dual threat quarterback, but you thought probably his legs were more dangerous than his throwing. Everything was just the opposite. And for Texas A&M having gotten beat at home by Notre Dame last year to go up to South Bend and win that game the way they did, it was an exciting, incredible football game. And it's almost anything they can dream of on this season with that win if they'll just take their season one at a time. But I will say this, sometimes when we look at offense and we look at defense and we don't look enough at special teams, you don't know when you're going to mess a play up, but you can see when you mess up, it can cost you the game. There were 3 plays in that game that could have affected the entire outcome. Only the last one ultimately did, but the very first punt that Texas A&M lined up, Notre Dame went through and blocked it, scoop and score for 7 points. That's 7 points that were tacked on. They were there all the way to the end. And then there was a 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown where A&M would have tied it up or would have come back on them that time. And yet that was called back with a holding penalty. And you thought, well, they just lost it right there. And then Notre Dame came back and probably the ultimate sin to miss it, to botch an extra point. You know, it's funny, all my 28 years as a head coach in college, after you score a touchdown, a lot of head coaches walk down to the end of the bench and talk to their players. I am riveted to that field because I am so worried about us messing up an extra point and how that messes up your whole game. I watch it closely, and they botched it. Perfect snap. They botched it. They gave A&M a chance to go down and score a touchdown and kick the extra point and win the game, and they did on the last play of the game.
I know they're part of the team. I know the specials are part of the team, Coach, but I have a mentality. If you have to rely on a kicker, your team stinks. You know, my job as head coach, we score every time. I'm not relying on the kicker. I don't care. You know, even in a tie game, kickers, in my opinion, they cost you more than they win you. I don't care how many game-winning kicks one guy has throughout the course of his career. I guarantee you he's cost you more in the long run than he's won you. And that's an honest assessment. Now, Marcel Reed, who saw this, Coach? Marcel Reed, 17 or 37. It looks like, the kid stunk. 360 yards, though. He accounts for 397 total.
Big plays.
Unbelievable. I love this kid.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And he has such a smooth release and a pretty throw. And it was a big plays, the explosive plays. You know, we all want to throw for 70%. That's kind of the thing now. When I was coaching back in the 80s and 90s, it was play action passes. You were lucky to hit 50%. That was just like the cutoff point for a good passing day. With all the dump offs and the shotgun and the flares and the bubbles and the hitch screens, if you're not throwing 65%, you're not throwing. Well, Marcel was throwing downfield because those big plays are a lot more damaging to the other team than those little bubbles and hitches that some of these quarterbacks are getting their percentage up so high on. He went downfield and hit a ton of them, and it was the difference. And I was very impressed, and now I have a whole different feel for Texas A&M's offense right now, what they're capable of doing. I think they're going to play. Although Notre Dame got 40 points, I still see Texas A&M as having a strong defense that can win ball games for them.
22-1 on FanDuel to win a national championship. If we're looking at the SEC conference odds, we have Georgia plus 290, Texas 3-1, Bama, and we got to get into Bama, plus 550. Tell me where they're coming up with that number. Plus 550 for LSU. And A&M is 12-1. If we're looking at the breakdown of Alabama and A&M, is Alabama that much shorter? Like we're thinking Alabama's that much more dominant than Texas A&M? I don't see it.
I mean,
I'd rather take A&M.
The only thought I have on this is I think certain teams, because of the talent level and the depth of the talent level, that in so many of these teams, getting to the college football playoffs is one thing, but having the talent, because we have to assume everybody will be playing better. If you're in the playoffs, you're playing better football. Now, if the teams with the best talent, athletic NFL-type talent, are now playing their best football, then they're going to be at their best in the playoffs of the season. And if they have depth because injuries are going to play a part too. I just think all those things that we know by the NFL rankings and what the draft talk about, and that Ohio State's going to have those type of players. Texas are going to have those type. Alabama has those. Georgia, when it comes to the draft, we're going to see those. And I think that's where, when you're looking way down the road, you see the possibilities. The problem that doesn't take into account is that football is a team sport, team chemistry, team playing together, being a great 11 against their 11. It's not one guy versus one guy. It's a team. And some people, when you put 11 together, they play better than somebody else's 11. And that's what I think it's hard to predict it's like Vanderbilt. In a lot of sense, their 11 play better than your 11, even when you got better individual talent quite a bit. And so I think that's what makes it a little bit difficult to pull away from the teams are going to have the most guys drafted at the end of the season. They're the ones likely to have the most talent at the end of the game, at the end of the season, playing their best football.
That's a great point. So let's look at the three teams that we just broke down. Notre Dame,
Right.
Let's look at A&M, and let's look at Alabama, because Notre Dame now is 17.5-point home favorites over Barry Odom and Purdue. They then have to play Arkansas, and I know Arkansas right now is not ranked. I'm going to tell you this right now. The way that Notre Dame defense is playing, right, seeing that they got torched by Carson Beck and last week against Marcel Reed, there's no guarantee they're walking into Fayetteville if they can't contain Taylon Green, and they're going to be potentially in another game in a couple of weeks. So I'm just saying, they'll be favored in that game, but that's no easy road. Boise State at home, NC State at home, USC, that's the top 25 opponent.
That's right.
Boston College, right? Pitt, Navy, Syracuse, and Stanford. Coach, there's no marquee. I don't care about the brand recognition. I don't care. This team is different. The two toughest games on their schedule, they lost. I don't care that they lost close. The bottom line is there's not one game that they could get back into the mix and say they have a top 10 win over a dominant opponent. The only one that they have to hope on is USC basically running the table.
Well, and I think, and I don't know if that's not taken into account enough. There's not a clear path for Notre Dame to make it to the college football playoffs. Not a clear path. I heard a lot of prognosticators or announcers nationally said they're going to win this game and they're going to be in the playoffs. Well, you can't have one without the other. They lost that game. And so they're not going to be. So I think you also have to look at that. There are certain teams that their schedule is so tough that somewhere along the line, they're going to lose one or too many games to be in a position when the college football playoffs come up. And others have the perfect, if they just don't lose against teams they should beat. I felt that way about Clemson when the season began, after what we heard, that if they could have gotten by their opening game, even if they didn't, it looked like they were going to be favored in every other game. Well, that's not true.
Right.
That was what we looked at and what we thought. I think we have to reevaluate based on how people perform, because football is a game of performance. How can I perform? What have you done for me lately? And how good are you playing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll take a look. And I said I liked right now Texas A&M and their ability to potentially challenge 22-1. They have Auburn on September 27th. Miss State, who's undefeated, playing very well, will be joined by ESPN host out in Jackson, Mississippi, Jake Wimberly, who covers the Bulldogs, covers Ole Miss as well. So we'll get Jake's take about where Mississippi State and Blake Shapen are. So now, not an easy game. Potentially Miss State and A&M have gone back and forth throughout the years. Florida, we'll see where the Gators are after their road game against Miami. Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, Samford, and then they close it out with Texas. So not easy for A&M to get back into the mix. But again, what SEC schedule is, I still like what Elko has. And if Marcel Reed is going to continue to roll sevens, Coach, I'll take a shot. Let's look at Alabama, and you tell me, would you buy into this $5.50 price where they're at? So they got through the first couple of games, right? You ready? They got Georgia on September 27th. It's a night game in Athens. And then they have revenge with Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. That is not an easy game, Vandy. Catching Alabama after Georgia. Then they go on the road to Columbia to face off against Missouri. Third Saturday in October is Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU. Let's continue to go. After the LSU game, they have Oklahoma. They get the Eastern Illinois FCS and then the Iron Bowl. That is not easy for back in Alabama at plus 550.
And I think you could probably run down the schedule, or at least half, or probably 2/3 of the team in the conference, and they've got the same type of schedule. You can replace Texas A&M with Arkansas, or Ole Miss with Auburn, but you're going to have a lot of those teams right in the middle that you got to find a way to beat and not get beat by them. Because the funny thing is, you see one of our top 3 teams or 4 teams, and they're playing another team in the conference that, I mean, they're 3-point favorites of a team that doesn't have a chance to be in the playoffs, according to what people think. It's a tighter race now. It's a tighter situation with most of these teams in the conference. So, again, anything can happen. And I still think we've got some dark horses in the SEC that could jump up and shake everything up before it's all over with.
Yeah, we thought it was South Carolina. Lenora Sellers goes down. They're 12.5-point road dogs on FanDuel right now against Elia Drinkowitz and Missouri. I still think South Carolina in that game, a look ahead this weekend, potentially could be live. And again, I know backup quarterback. I get that. They didn't perform. But I think if you're Shane Beamer right now, you got abused at home. You're going on the road. You're giving it your best effort. And maybe you don't win that game, but from a defensive effort, you step up, you keep it close. And I like actually South Carolina plus the 12.5 points. Do you agree in that mentality that Beamer could get them up after the disappointing home loss?
Well, you know what? Based on what he's accomplished in the past, I think he knows how to get them up. There better be some closed doors discussions that are hot and heavy. They need to be taken to the shed a little bit on the way they've played, especially offensively. And if I'm Shane Beamer, I'm going to dadgum. It's going to be a pretty intense practice and coaching staff meetings. About where we're going with this football program and what we got to do, because we have not played up to our standard and what we thought. They're sitting number 11 in the country last week, and even without the quarterback, you would have thought they would not have fallen behind against Vandy like they did, and yet they did. So I think they do come back and play well, but I think it probably are going to be some discussions that can't be reprinted in the open market, open audience.
Yeah, so South Carolina potentially could be on my list this weekend as an upset special. It wouldn't shock me if they go to Columbia and potentially, play their hearts out. Here's another dog, and I'm scratching my head, Coach, because I don't know if I could buy in. But last year's game, Auburn dominated. Michael Hawkins, the former Oklahoma quarterback, was a deer in the headlights, but somehow, some way, he pulls it out in the fourth quarter. They win it going away with the pick six over Peyton Thorne, and they win it 24-21. Jackson Arnold now playing above his head, you could say, through 3 weeks. Auburn's undefeated. They go on the road to Norman. So it's Mateer and Jackson Arnold. I'm starting to think the 6.5 looks enticing. Could Hugh Freeze actually step up and win this game? Is it possible?
Hugh Freeze used to make a living at Ole Miss beating Alabama. He's had some big games in his career, and I like it. 6.5. I think it's probably a 3-point game one way or the other. I think Auburn plays up, and I think they'll play a great football game. And they right now, he's got those people believing, and got those players believing in themselves. And Jackson Arnold, he will be keyed up for this game. I'm hoping he doesn't get too keyed up. This game won't come down to him making every play. Just manage your team, be a good, solid quarterback who throws when you need to throw and run when you need to run, but don't try to do everything by yourself, because you're going to play a team that's got a pretty good quarterback in John Mateer, who has played very well, and a coordinator in Dick Venables, and they know Jackson Arnold pretty good. But then again, he's able to know them pretty well too. He knows his personnel. He knows the talent level of one corner as opposed to another corner. It's going to be kind of valuable to Auburn that he knows the personnel from the inside, just as it's probably valuable to Brent Venables to know that he can't throw as well to this side, or he can't throw as well to his left, or he gets scrambled real easy, or he likes to roll to one side and not the other. There are certain things you learn scrimmaging over and over again that you only know about your own team. So there'll be a chance for Auburn to know a little bit about Oklahoma, a little bit more about Auburn. But in the bottom line, I just think Auburn's going to get this down. It's going to be a field goal one way or the other.
See, now you got me thinking, because you brought up something that, I remember last year Jackson Arnold was a deer in the headlights, and I understand he was young, he was inexperienced. I got that, but he got pulled in the big matchup against Tennessee. He had his team in a position when they went on the road in the Grove, and they were down 26-14. I had Oklahoma that day plus the 17.5, and he hung in there. He got me the cover. But then I just look at the stat sheets. Baylor, he throws for 108 yards. He completes 54% against South Alabama for $142. That ain't going to get it done against Oklahoma, and that's certainly not going to get it done against John Mateer. I think Oklahoma routes them now. I did a complete 360. He's going to put it this way. If you're back in Auburn, and tell me if I'm wrong, he's going to have to throw for about 2.25, because there's no difference between what Jackson Arnold brings to the table and Bryce Underwood. The only difference is Jackson Arnold is a little bit older. Outside of that, I don't think he's got anything more than what Bryce Underwood had, and they only scored 13 points.
Well, Bryce Underwood is a different animal to me. He's one of the most gifted athletes out there in the football world from a standpoint of how talented he was coming out of high school. But he is more of a deer in headlights, as you mentioned, that Jackson Arnold might have been last year in his first year starting. Jackson Arnold has been in a lot of big games now, win or lose, and has faced adversity. I just think you're going to get a more calm game out of him. And again, the whole object is to run the game plan that you require you to run. And again, I don't know whether Hugh Freeze is just telling us, the fans, the writers, what we want to hear, or that's the way it really is. But he has kind of downplayed. He's overplayed or talked about his conservative play calling style, getting ahead, that they've not pulled everything out, bringing the quarterback along slowly. A lot of those things he's talked about. So we'll see. I'm not sold at how good Michigan was coming into that game. They're a good team, but not a great team. And Oklahoma, like Auburn, I mean, they've each played one good team. Auburn won theirs, and Oklahoma won theirs, and they played some teams that couldn't have beat them. On a bad day, they weren't going to beat them, and so it'll be interesting. But I've just got this feeling that Auburn is going to make this thing close and play a good game. And I haven't quite got them winning this ball game yet, but I got them keeping it close.
Interesting. We'll see where I starting to feel more Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma could struggle against a more complete quarterback in the conference. They obviously have to play Arch Manning. They have to play on the road against Joey Aguilar. I think those are very difficult games as well. And seeing both, obviously, Arch and Joey Aguilar, and seeing Aguilar step up against Georgia, I think that could be a game where Tennessee exposes potentially the Oklahoma secondary. So I'll hold off. I'm going to break down some numbers tonight and see where we stand. A couple of other games of note, Coach. That Michigan-Nebraska game, it's a tight spread. It's 2.5 points in favor of the Wolverines, which, I mean, I can't believe that Michigan is favored in this matchup. I understand, it's Michigan and the brand recognition, but they didn't show you anything impressive against Oklahoma, and they barely beat New Mexico at home a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, in Central Michigan, I think that's who they played last week. That's just not I haven't seen enough from Michigan. I really haven't seen enough to convince me that, I mean, they have the name recognition. They're Michigan. They're playing in the big house. but Nebraska's got an outstanding head coach. Their quarterback, he's got almost as much acclaim coming into Nebraska as Underwood had going into Michigan. And so, but he's got a little more experience under his belt right now. And so I don't know that I haven't had a good enough feel for this one yet because, like I said, you got Nebraska hadn't beaten anybody. They played three people. I don't, three teams that are not very good. Michigan's played one good team, but they got their panties handed to them in that game. So you got two teams that I don't feel like I know a real good bit about. But I think Raiola is a quarterback that's got a little more experience. I think they'll go in there and play under Coach Rule, and I just got this Nebraska feeling there because I'm just not sold on Michigan right now in their rebuilding process that they're doing.
Me neither. So I lean to Nebraska. This is a real get right spot to showcase that Matt Rule has brought Nebraska back. This is an opportunity to say, hey, it took us a while. We finally got over the hump. We went 5-7 in year one. We lost, what was it, like 3 or 4 games by 7 points or less. We couldn't make it to a bowl. We finally made it to a bowl last year, and now we're willing to take the next step in year number 3. And he's got the more experienced quarterback, and he potentially has the better defense entering this matchup. This Nebraska front seven can run sideline to sideline. So I'm with you, Coach. We'll see. Here's an upset special potentially.
All right.
I don't know if I bought in yet. You're going to think I'm nuts. Florida potentially walks into South Beach and strikes the upset over Miami. Now, hear me out. Miami's feeling all good. People are calling Miami the most complete team in the nation. Florida with DJ Lagway, Napier on the hot seat. This spread is 7.5, Coach. It should be 10.5 based on it's back-to-back road games. Granted, it's in the state of Florida. I think Florida could potentially be live this weekend.
I mean, I see where you're coming from. If you go look at the LSU game and the stats, Florida outstatted LSU in almost every category. They just had 5 intercepts. Now, I will say this. Here's why I can't go with Florida. I watched that game and I watched every interception, and I felt like he lost. He didn't care. At some point, Legway threw interceptions, threw into crowds that showed a lack of protection of the football, the fear of a turnover, or the understanding of how valuable it is to not have turnovers. And that scares me a ton. I said, here's a guy that used terrible judgment on quite a few throws. And it wasn't just like the ball bounced off 3 guys and hit somebody else. He threw it into a crowd. Then he just slung it down the field into the middle of the field with other people. And he did it several times. And the game was 3 points difference. It was
right.
And so I worry about that right now because he has the talent and they won games, but he showed me a something that scares you about a quarterback understanding the importance of protective football, not throwing interceptions, how critical every series is, every play is. And I said, you know what? If he don't throw it to the right color jerseys, Billy Napier's not going to be there till halfway through the season. Do they have the talent? I think they showed it against LSU that if that doesn't happen, they can play with most everybody in that conference.
They can, and we'll see. Here's another game that, again, just from a national championship perspective, could really shape everything. We're talking about, the matchup in Salt Lake City. It's Texas Tech and Utah, and I just want to get your take. I mean, Texas Tech and Utah, 2 teams in the Big 12, and we've seen an older coach in Kyle Whittingham.
Yeah.
Again, he played – I always said this, the conference realignment hurt certain teams. I think Utah was one of those teams. I thought West Virginia, when they first went into the Big 12, with the logistics of traveling and just back and forth to certain stadiums and programs
no
right? So could Utah be this team, though? They have a mobile quarterback in Dampier. They play good defense. They don't play elite defense. And Texas Tech, from what I've watched with Joey McGuire, they have taken in so much money, so much transfer talent that they are due for a potential breakout year. They've been to back-to-back bowl games, and Joey McGuire has won. I like Morton, the quarterback. I think they strike the upset, just big picture, and they could be a team to watch in the Big 12.
Yeah, what does FanDuel have on this game? What's the line on
Two
this
and a
game?
half. Two and a
You know,
half.
I have studied and I have watched and I have watched and I have seen Texas Tech is in this commitment to turn that program into a big time program financially. They have made a decision to do it, and they have got a talented football team. And the way they've played, I think Texas Tech's going to beat Utah. I think they are an example of those teams in the country that understand. In Nebraska, I don't. That's one of those things. Nebraska, somewhere along the line, they had so much success in the old-fashioned way of building a program. They have to make a decision as well. They got that quarterback, but I think Texas Tech made the decision. We're going to go out there and make sure we have a strong NIL group that we're going to bring in athletes, and they've done that. And I kind of had them pegged right now as the team to beat in the conference, and so I kind of I like them against Utah.
Yeah, I do as well. I think potentially maybe we look at that total 57 and a half. It's
Mhm.
back up to 3.5. It dipped in the afternoon. It was 2.5 right
Right.
before we got on the show. We're seeing 3.5s potentially in the market. I mentioned the Florida game, coach. That's 7.5 in favor of Miami over the Gators. I think the Gators could be live. I mentioned Michigan 2.5 point road favorites over Nebraska. That total
Mhm.
45 and a half has me buying potentially to the under, but you never know. The Tulane game, which we covered earlier, Ole Miss 11.5 point favorites at home. They've won 13 straight, the last four by an average margin of victory of 27.5 points per game. I actually like the under in that matchup. Oklahoma 6.5 point favorites over Auburn on FanDuel. Total is 48.5. Now, this total last year was 44.5, and they just got over it with the interception with Oklahoma. The kid missed a field goal at the end, and that's another thing. Auburn's kicker was terrible last year. He missed two easy gimmies, and that cost them the potential win at home over the Sooners. One more game that we didn't talk about. Brett Bielema, 5.5 point road dogs against Kirk Cignetti and Indiana. Could Indiana do it again? Could they be a 7-0, 8-0 football team with Cignetti? What's his coaching style like that? He gets the most out of just, non-top 5 talent. We'll see. Coach Bowden having some technical difficulties, but Coach and I will bring it up tomorrow on the show. You talk about Illinois, 5.5 point road dogs against Indiana. Total is 52.5 on FanDuel, plus 168 for the Fighting Illini, minus 205 for Indiana in that matchup. We'll be back tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, to break it down. For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.